Okay, now the meninges of the brain are the same as the meninges around our spinal cord. Remember, this is the membrane that protects our brain and spinal cord. So back in chapter 13, I went over this, so I don't want to spend a ton of time on this, but we're going to go back to handout 13A just for a quick review. Remember that the meninges are a set of connective tissue membranes that wrap up the brain. So it says that they encompass the brain and spinal cord. They're made out of 3 layers: the Dura Mater, the Arachnoid Mater, and the Pia Mater. And then remember that there are spaces in between these. So we have the subdural space that's between the Dura Mater and the Arachnoid Mater. And then we have the Sub-Arachnoid space that's between the Arachnoid Mater and the Pia Mater. Now, our handout is going to be the exact same. I didn't even create a new handout because what's the point? We went over this. So this is handout 13A. And with handout 13A, I just give you the meninges, right? So we've got the Dura Mater made out of dense irregular connective tissue. It's that thick layer. It's between, with the brain, it's going to be right up against the skull. So it's underneath the skull and on top of the brain. Then we've got the Arachnoid Mater made up of a webbing of collagen. So it looks like a spider web. And then right up against the brain, smacked against the brain, is the Pia Mater that is going to be right up against the brain and spinal cord, and it's a very thin layer. Now remember, in between these layers, we've got spaces. So above the Dura Mater, between the Dura Mater and the skull itself, we've got this epidural space, which is made mostly of fat. Then between the Dura Mater and the Arachnoid Mater, we have the subdural space, which is full of fluid. And then below the Arachnoid Mater, we have our subarachnoid space, which is full of cerebral spinal fluid that's coming from those ventricles. So the choroid plexuses of the ventricles are producing the cerebral spinal fluid that's in the subarachnoid space. This is going to be a protective barrier so that our brain doesn't just slap up against our hard skull when we hit our head. There is some cushion there. All right, this is designed to be a cushion. And then don't forget that I have the order, the correct order, except for handout 13A, it says vertebrae. We just need to think of the skull. So it's going to go skull, then that's epidural space, then the Dura Mater, then the subdural space, then the Arachnoid Mater, the subarachnoid space, and the Pia Mater. So this is all just protection, right? We are going to be protecting the brain with these meninges. All right? And it's sort of like an airbag, well, full of fluid, but a bag to protect the brain to trauma. All right. Now, if you may have heard of someone hitting their head and they get something called like a subdural hematoma. That is when blood is leaking into that subdural space underneath the Dura Mater. So it's a subdural hematoma. Hematoma means a blood clot. And subdural means it's under the Dura Mater. This can be life-threatening because it can push on the brain and cut blood supply to the brain. But if you hit your head hard enough, these meninges can't help, and we can form other problems like that subdural hematoma. But here you can see the different layers. All right. We do have some other structures, like right down that longitudinal fissure. We have what's called the sagittal sinus. There's a little gap where there's more space in there where the cerebral spinal fluid can flow. Okay, so that is handout 13A for chapter 14. Now we're going to move into the ventricles and talk a little bit about cerebral spinal fluid flow, and those ventricles we learned in lab.